Welcome to the Bulletproof Cash Flow Podcast, the go-to place to gain financial freedom through real estate investing. Here we interview investors, mentors, and entrepreneurs who share their secrets and advice to help you build passive income. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Augustino. Deal syndication is the preferred method for taking down large real estate properties. While it's great to have investors partner on a deal, there are many legal issues to navigate when syndicating a deal. If you aren't familiar with the Securities Exchange Commission and their regulations, you may encounter some serious problems if you execute a syndication incorrectly. Well, today's guest is one of the nation's leading syndication lawyers. He has been in the commercial and investment real estate business since 1972, and since then has been engaged on thousands of deals. He solely provides legal and real estate consulting services to people specializing in the syndication of commercial and investment real estate. He's also the founding partner of the corporate security law firm Trowbridge Sidoti LLP, based out of California. And he's also the author of a great book. It's A Whole New Business, The How-To of Syndicated Investment Real Estate. With all that, I'd like to welcome Gene Trowbridge. So welcome, Gene. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Augustino. I appreciate it. I know you said syndication is the choice for when you do large deals, and I want everyone to understand it's the choice for when you do a deal that you don't have all the money to do by yourself. That's what it is. And my definition of a large deal is it's more money than I have. Everyone is different in that. So when you have to reach out and pull money from other people, this is the avenue to go, right?
Excellent. That's right. That's right. Well, before we go on, if you like what Gene has to say, you can check out the company website at crowdfundinglawyers.net, or you can reach his office by phone at 323-799-1342. Okay, Gene, let's maybe give the listeners a brief intro about how you got started.
All right. Well, I came into commercial real estate right out of college. I had an accounting degree back in the Midwest. And after 2 or 3 years of being just a broker, I started putting together small investments with my friends, people I went to college with, people I met in the real estate business. And by 1979, which is about 7 years, I went full-time into the syndication business. And
Nice.
actually moved to California in 79 and have been a syndicator out here really to about 2000. And in 1995, I went to law school. I had some harebrained idea that would be a good deal. So I, with kids and a wife and everything, I went to law school and passed the bar and was sworn in California. But it took me until about 2000 until I actually started the practice of law, and that the only law I practice, I don't do divorces, I don't do wills. The only law I practice is securities laws. And so now for the last roughly 20 years, this part of my career is mentoring and doing the legal work and helping other people get in the business and build their business.
So now, why would you do the whole law thing? Because I know how much fun law school is. I'm sure maybe that's not the reason why you did it, though, right?
Well, first of all, I hadn't done anything in a while to improve myself, so I wanted to do something in that. And in what I was doing, an MBA, which was the other choice, really wouldn't have helped me because I've always been an independent. I've never had a W-2. I've always been either on my own or a 1099 guy. So being an MBA didn't seem to help. So I thought I'd go to law school. But the real reason was I was coming to the end of putting up with partners. I say, if you hear me, that the care and maintenance of partners can sometimes become overwhelming. And at the time I decided to really get out of the business of syndication, I had, 850 partners. And in my last year, the height of insanity, I sent out 1,687 K1s. There were no support functions back then to help a smaller syndicator like myself. I just had to build up my own staff to deal with all that. Today, there are several companies that would have done that on a fee base, and it would have maybe made a difference if I'd stayed there. But I was really tired of dealing with the partners. And another thing, I was raising all my money through the broker-dealer network. And that isn't the most feel-good place to raise money. So I had just done it for long enough, and I thought I'd make a change.
So you say the broker-dealer network. What is that exactly?
Stockbrokers, certified financial planners, registered investment advisors, all people generally who have securities licenses. I would really wholesaling. I would get my offering and I would take it into their offices, get a bunch of ladies and guys together, tell them about my deal, and then they would go forth and convince their clients, their investors, to invest in the deals. It was a heady deal. It was a black suit, white shirt, shine shoes, power tie.
That's expensive, though, I would imagine, right? The cost of that money.
Yeah. It's expensive.
But that's what it took to get it done.
Yes, it cost somewhere between 8 and 10% of everything we raised, but it was a sales force. I didn't have to have a sales force per se. I had all of them. I had a couple wholesalers who would go out and meet people also, but that's the way I did it.
Nice, good. Okay, so do you still own property today then, or did you unload everything?
On my own.
Okay.
All the things that we syndicated, because Agostino, I did primarily storage. We built self-storage facilities all throughout Southern California, quite a few. And eventually that's one of the reasons I could go to law school and maybe make a career change, is I had a whole bunch of fees coming in. I had my share of my investments and I had my override as the manager. So I really had 6 or 7 years ahead of me of being an asset manager and developing a lot of income without having to raise money. So it's a perfect time.
Nice. Excellent. That's the whole lesson around why we get into this business in the first place, right? To have that passive income to do what you really want to do. And that's ultimately what it is.
Right. And in business, you help other people. Every time I work with a client and give them their offering documents and they go forward and raise money and close the deal, I'm helping them. They're helping the investors who would never get involved if there wasn't a place for passive investors to get involved. So I think it's a good deal.
Yes, excellent. Well, so you went to law school and you decided that you're going to take up securities law. So maybe we could talk about what is a security and why the SEC is even involved. Like, what are these people there for in the first place?
Well, after the market crash back in the 1930s, Congress formed the Securities and Exchange Commission because they felt stocks and bonds and all those things that were being sold on Wall Street needed a regulation. And so they formed the Securities and Exchange Commission. And there were really two parts to that. One part was a need for disclosure. So they passed a law called the 33 Act. And the 33 Act says the sponsor's responsibility is to give the investors all the material facts ahead of time so the investor knows what's going on and the investor can make an informed decision before they invest. And that's where the need for a PPM comes about. One of the ways that you can abide by the law in your full disclosure of material facts is to issue a PPM. So that was one law, full disclosure. So that was regulating what you were selling. The second law was to regulate who was selling it. So the 34 Act came along and gave the SEC the authority to issue licenses to stockbrokers, financial planners, and whatever. And the goal there was to make sure that we didn't have fraudulent people selling fraudulent investments. And we're still operating under those laws today with a few minor changes. We still, if you ever saw a lawsuit that was brought by the SEC against someone, it would still reference the 33 Act and the 34 Act, and away we go. So it's a criminal statute. If you screw up, you go to jail. Okay. And everyone's heard of Bernie Madoff. That's what he did. Okay.
So you don't want to screw this up, guys.
Yeah, that's right. As my wife said, why would anyone have invested with a guy whose name was Made Off? So
that's funny. So I know that the SEC treats this transaction of a multifamily deal, for instance, as a security, right?
It sure does. And the questions I get a lot are, Gene, I want to put together a group of investors, but I don't want to do a syndication. And I'm saying, well, that's the wrong question, because a syndication simply is two or more people pooling their resources, their experience, their skills to get something done. Like when you go to the movie, at the beginning of the movie, it has all the different companies that are involved in making the movie. That's a syndication. You jump on a commercial airlines plane to go somewhere. That's a syndication. That isn't the issue. If you're going to raise money from multiple people, it is going to be a syndication. The issue is, does it rise to the level of a security? And generally, it's a security if all the investors invest their money in the same way in a common enterprise. They're expecting a profit, but they're expecting on the sponsor to make it happen. So they truly are passive. And if I was the sponsor, I'd be making all the decisions. That makes it a security. Now, we could have 4 or 5 people get together, form an LLC, buy their own property, and vote to do all the decisions unanimously. That would be a member-managed LLC. That's not a security. But if I'm going to raise the money from them and I'm telling them I'm making all the decisions, I found the property, I negotiated the loan, I'm going to hire the property manager, I'm going to do all this stuff, then it's a managed LLC, and then that's a security, and then you have to follow the rules if you're going to do that.
Yes. And that's it's a little different than crowdfunding too, right? Because I know that that's something that's fairly new.
Well, crowdfunding really started heavy duty over in Europe. And how it came over here is something, I'm going to use one example, GoFundMe. You've heard of people putting together a GoFundMe site so they could get braces on their teeth or go to college or whatever.
Yeah.
That was all crowdfunding, taking your message to the crowd. The wisdom of the crowd says, well, this is a good reason. They send you some money and you do what you're going to do. The most common use for that type of crowdfunding in America has always been the production of IPAs, special brand beers. Hey, I've got this great beer I'm making in my basement. If I could get more equipment and rent a little store, we could sell it. Send me some money and I'll send you 5 cases of beer. Okay, so none of that has to do with sharing the profits.
Right.
And in the securities world, that's one of the 4 prongs, is the investor is expecting a profit. So all that other stuff is crowdfunding, but here comes the Jobs Act, which was a change of the securities rules in 2013. And basically the Jobs Act says you can go out and do what everyone else has always been doing in crowdfunding. And you call it crowdfunding, but if you're going to share profits, we're going to have you do it under the securities laws. So it's always going to be a syndication. 2 people is a syndication. It's a joint venture, a general partner. I don't care. 2 people. But the issue is, does it rise to the level of being a security? And then does everyone have to follow the rules?
Nice. Okay. Well, for the sake of this discussion, we'll stick to the whole syndication model.
Absolutely, syndication rising to a security, because all of the passive investors who are out there are listening to you. They're going to count on the sponsor. They're going to count on the lead to make this happen. And all the people out there who want to be leads, well, they're going to take people's money.
Yep.
They're going to take people's money, and they have a fiduciary duty to manage that money well. And they're going to be making the decisions, so they have to follow the securities rules.
Oh yeah, it's a huge responsibility. I mean, not only for the deal you'd be working on, but if you mess it up, I mean, you're going to deal with the SEC, but of course you'll never have another syndication ever again. I mean, it's your whole livelihood. It's gone.
That's absolutely true. And that, just as an aside, the Jobs Act started this policy that I, as an attorney, have to ask you, if you're going to be a syndicator, to submit a bad actor questionnaire. Because as I said earlier, the 34 Act requires stockbrokers to be licensed. And there's probably a lot of follow-up and research and due diligence on a person before they get a securities license. But there's never been any follow-up or due diligence on a sponsor. So the Jobs Act said, let's change that. So they came out with this bad actor questionnaire, and everyone who's in charge of money has to fill out a bad actor questionnaire. And if you've done anything wrong, you're barred from being in the securities world. If you've done anything wrong since 2013, if you did something wrong when there wasn't that type of a law, we have to disclose it. But yeah, there is some regulation on syndicators now, which will kick them out of the business if they screw up.
Nice. Well, good. Okay. Well, maybe we can go through the process. So for someone that's never done this before, what are they doing? Aside from picking up the phone and calling the number, what else needs to happen?
Generally, they've been out looking at properties. Most of the people call me at least have a letter of intent. If they're going to use a letter of intent format, they have a letter of intent signed on a property, and there's some negotiation going on for the purchase and sale agreement. So then they call me and say, we're getting ready to go. I've done enough due diligence. I know what the financing is going to be. I'm going to go through with this offer. So then we send fee agreements to establish the attorney-client relationship and get paid. And then I talk to the, let's say it's you, I talk to Agostino and I say, have you put together any preliminary property package? Have you done an Excel spreadsheet? Have you done any economic analysis? Do you have the package that the listing agent had? Can you send me all that stuff? And I'll get all that stuff, and then I'll call you back, and we'll have what I call my deal structure interview. And I go through about 8 pages of questions that I have with you, which is designed to let me figure out what the story is. What's the story of your offering? What do I need to know? What are the names of the entities? Who are the people? How are you going to split money and all that? Once I get my deal structure interview completed, I can start drafting part of the PPM. The private placement memorandum has 3 parts. The first part is a disclosure document. And a lot of people call that the PPM, but it's just part of it, the disclosure document. And in that, I'm telling the story. This is the business, these are the risks, these are the conflicts, these are the voting rights, everything you need to know. It's just explained. I write that in a draft form and send it to you, and you read it and tell me if I've got it right. After that, after I've got it right, we probably have a few changes. As you're going along in that stage of your real estate analysis, the lenders might change. You might have learned more about the property. You might think you need to raise more money or less money. There's probably some change there. So we come out with the second draft, and at that time I put together the second part of the PPM, which is the operating agreement. And the operating agreement takes the story and puts it into legal jargon and sets the rule on how I'm going to manage your money, what my responsibilities are, what my liabilities are, what your responsibilities are, and what choices can you make. And so then that's the operating agreement. And then the third part of the PPM, the private placement memorandum, is the subscription booklet, which kind of has 2 parts. One is the client fills it out and said, I'd like to invest $100,000 with you. And then there's all sorts of contract type language in there. And then I, as the sponsor, the syndicator, want to know who's investing in my deal. I want to know what some of the requirements. Are you meeting the requirements that you need to do for my deal? So attached to that is an offeree questionnaire where I go through, are you accredited? Are you sophisticated? What's your experience? How old are you? How liquid are you? And all that, so I can make a decision that you should be in my deal. And those documents are all drafted. I send them to you. You go out, raise money. You tell me when you've raised all the money, and then the attorney does some securities notices to the states where investors live and to the SEC through an information form that the attorney fills out. 3 weeks probably to draft the documents.
But still a lot of work, it sounds like. A lot of moving parts.
There's a lot of communication back and forth between you and me too. Well, we've worked together. So
yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of communication back and forth, right?
Yeah. So now, what are the type of offerings that there are? Because I know there's several, right? Or at least 2.
Yes, there's Regulation D, as a big picture and Regulation A as another big picture. And let's just deal with Regulation A just for a second. Regulation A is really what I don't do that, but my partner Jillian does Regulation A and A+ offerings. It's as close to a public offering as you can get. You take all your information to the SEC. They read every word, all your advertisements. They issue a permit to you. Then you can go forth and you can raise up to $50 million in a year, and you can advertise, and you can take any investor.
Oh, wow. Is that similar to what like a Grant Cardone would do? Because I think he's doing something like that, right?
We did his legal work for his first, the Reg A+ that's on the street now.
Nice.
And so he did that so he could stand up in front of his audience and pitch his deals and not worry about if they're accredited or sophisticated. So he could talk to everyone. That's not for everyone, that Regulation A. It takes 6 months to get that done. Probably costs $125,000 with all the fees and audits you need and everything. And then you have an offering, but do you have any money to market it? So that's not for everyone, and I wouldn't worry about that. But the other big picture is Regulation D. Regulation D is responsible for last year $1.8 trillion being raised in syndication. Not all real estate, about a third of it's real estate, but that's still $500-600 billion. A lot of money.
A lot of money.
A lot of money. And Regulation D right now really has two avenues for the listener. One avenue is to do a deal with people you know. You don't need to advertise. You're going to deal with relationships you have. And the term is there's no advertising or solicitation allowed. Everyone has to have a pre-existing relationship with you before they invest. And I went over that a little fast, but there was only one word that was important: pre-existing. Pre-existing means I've got to know you before my offering comes out. If I meet you while my offering is out there, I'm going to have some problems if someone asks me, how did I meet you? Did I advertise for you? Okay. So that's a problem. 506B is what we're talking about. All pre-existing relationships. Raise as much money as you want, as many accredited investors as you want, up to 35 who aren't accredited, but have some sophistication. No advertising. Jobs Act comes along in 2013 and says, well, why are we continuing to protect all these rich and smart people? Accredited investors, rich and smart.
That's right.
So we'll let you advertise, and we'll let you sell to people you have no pre-existing relationship with, because they're smart enough to look into the deal themselves and determine if it's suitable for them. And we just won't let you take anyone who isn't accredited. And further, we need to have you take a couple steps to verify that they're accredited. Over in B, where you can take all the accredited investors you want, all they have to do is check a box because you know them. And if Gene Trowbridge is going to invest with you and he checks the box that he's accredited, and you know that I just crawled out from under the underpass.
Right.
But I happen to have won 100,000 in the lottery. Maybe I'm not accredited, but you know all the people. So they can just check the box. But in the C, where you can advertise, you don't know anyone. So there is some third-party verification on whether you're accredited. $1 million net worth, not counting your house, or if you're a single person filing separately, $200,000 of annual income. If you're married filing jointly, $300,000 of annual income. Simple dollar and cents rules for being accredited.
Nice. I mean, I bet you've seen plenty of people making mistakes like that, right? Where they start advertising thinking that they have, I have the PPM. I can just start advertising to my heart's content. Have you ever seen anybody get in trouble for that?
Oh, yes. There's something out there called the cease and desist letter from the SEC. And, government budgets being what they are, They don't have to travel around the country anymore to find out who's doing something wrong. They just sit at their computer and type in the word guaranteed return. And here you go, looking for investors, and they find it. Of course, the biggest problem is social media. The SEC has come out with an edict that Facebook and actually anything on social media is advertising.
Yes.
So there are ways you can use social media, but you have to be careful and don't run afoul of the law. And so if they find that you're advertising, they'll issue a cease and desist letter. And probably the result of that is you'll have to give all the money back to the investors because you did it wrong, which is trouble if you've already bought the property.
Yes. Or, I guess worst case, you can still get fined too, I would imagine, right?
Sure, there are a number of things that are wrong.
Yeah. But I think if you wanted to even start up an investment fund, that goes hand in hand with a syndication, right?
Yeah, let's just talk. We talked about that briefly before we started. Most of my clients do what's called a specific offering. We're going to buy that apartment building. It's 100 units. It's in Denton, Texas. You can all drive by it. Here's the pictures, specific offering. And so that's what the offering is called. It's called a specific offering. On the other end of the spectrum is a blind pool, which a lot of people call a fund. Okay. And what do you do with the blind pool? You say, I have a track record of buying a lot of apartment buildings like the apartment we just bought in Denton, Texas. I've been doing that for years. We bought 20 properties. We know how to do this. Now what we want to do as an acquisition strategy is we want to raise all the money up front, and then we want to go to banks and buy troubled assets. We want to go to auctions and bid. We want to go to sellers and say, I can close in 15 days because I've got the money. So it's an acquisition strategy. Raising the money for a fund is almost impossible without a track record because you have nothing. You have nothing if you don't have a track record.
That's right.
Specific offering you can do without a track record. One of the questions that every passive investor should ask is, gee, have you done this before? And all of us have had to answer no once. So the way to get past that question is to do a specific offering, not a really big one. Do one that you can handle with the people that you know, get that deal purchased, closed, start managing it. And then someone says, have you done this before? You can say, hell yes. Hell yes, I have, Start. But over here in the blind pool, it's an acquisition strategy. Success stories. 2 clients. One client in the mobile home park business. We did their first specific offering and they raised $1.5 million to buy a park. Last year, we did a fund for them. They raised $150 million in 30 days to buy parks. Okay.
They paid all cash, I imagine, right?
They were paying all cash for all these parks. And having the money was an acquisition strategy for them. Another one is people in the multifamily business who have been buying properties now, since 2009, 2010. They're developing a good track record. Properties are appreciating. They now have a good management arm. And they're going out and they're putting together funds maybe to buy 2 or 3 properties at a time and raise 20, 30 million. In the middle is something called a semi-specified fund. And house flippers do this a lot. Client will come to me and say, I've done 100 houses. I've flipped 100 houses. Now I want to put together a fund. And I said, well, that's fine. But the 100 you've done have just been for you. You really don't have any experience of managing any other people's business, their money, writing reports and all that, do you? No. I said, why don't you go out and find 3 or 4 or 5 houses, put them under contract, come back and say, we're going to do a semi-specified offering. I want to buy 100 houses. Here's my business plan. And I've got the first 5 under contract. Absolutely match my business plan. So with the first dollars that we raise, which will likely come from people that they know, who'd like to be in business with them. We'll close on those first 5 deals. Now we don't have a blind offering anymore. We have an offering that's going on, and the looky-loos will wait until you close those first 4 or 5 deals, and then they'll pitch in their money and go forward.
Ah, very nice.
Yeah, so that's the marketing strategy. The goal still is to have the money to close quickly and seize on the opportunities. You can never go with a blind pool on one property, because the people will just say, well, why don't you wait until you get the property and let me look at it? That's not going to work.
Right. Well, it gives you a competitive edge, right? If there's a property, just like I said earlier, if you have $5 million in your pool already sitting by the sidelines, you can go walk up and say, I'll close that thing in 30 days right after due diligence. I got the cash right here.
Right. And actually, what I would do with your $5 million blind pool, I'd say, how much money do you think you really need to buy the first property based on what you're looking at? Well, you probably buy the first one with $1 million. Okay. Well, let's set a minimum of $1 million in your fund and a maximum of 5. And so the minute you raise $1 million, go out and buy something. Now you don't have a blind pool anymore. Now you've really moved into the semi-specified. And that's the way to do it. Yeah.
Very nice. Excellent. So how much experience would you say then that someone would have to really set up an investment fund? You said 20 units or 20 deals rather?
The market will tell you if you have experience. Doing one deal isn't going to be enough. I know my mobile home people, they probably were on offering 6 or 7 before they came out with their first blind pool. And their first blind pool was still, I think, $7.5 million fund.
So still fairly small. Interesting. Okay. So now, and I think you touched on this earlier. So what are the most common or biggest mistakes you've seen people make, aside from the marketing aspect? Have you seen other big mistakes that could have just been avoided?
Probably the biggest mistake, and the first question a passive investor should ask to the sponsor is, Augustino, if I give you my money, what happens if something happens to you? So the biggest mistake would be going into being a sponsor as an individual. Even if you wrap yourself in an LLC, which is a good idea, but it's just a single member LLC.
Right.
Something happens to you, all your investors are at risk. The reason I say that's the biggest mistake is I have been a substitute managing member, general partner for 6 deals in my life where something happened to the individual manager. In one case, it was death, but there were nasty divorces, bankruptcies. One guy hit his head skiing and came out of it as a quadriplegic. Another guy went into cancer, and they just couldn't continue to manage the money of 30 people. The people don't know how to manage it. They didn't buy in to become the replacement manager. So I always ask my passives, ask the question, if something happens to you, what's your plan for continuity? And I actually won't write an offering document, a private placement memorandum, unless the manager is an entity and has at least 2 people. I just won't write it. You have to go somewhere else. And when people ask me, will you review the documents because I want to make an investment in this fund, I generally don't do that. But I always tell them, look at the document and make sure that the sponsor is an entity with more than one person. If it's not, just don't invest. So that's a big mistake. As a sponsor, you make money as you're putting deals together. Your investors invest with you, hopefully, over and over and over. There's a lot of competition out there. So the mistake I made was thinking I always had to have an offering on the street. I came to a period in my career where it looked like I was going to maybe have 6 or 9 months between offerings. And I was thinking about all my stockbroker clients who were then going to get bombarded by other syndicators and put their investors' money in those other deals. So I better get a deal on the street. And I did a deal that didn't have enough upfront due diligence, not enough time. So we got our money back, and that's about it. But it was not a good situation and a lot of work. So not having enough time is a real big mistake from the sponsor standpoint.
Yes. Well, I think you go over all this stuff in your ultimate crowdfunding workshop, I imagine, right? I know it's a workshop that you run. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we do have a 2-day workshop, day and a half, 2-day workshop that we do go through all this. And it's designed for people who are either new to being syndicators or people who are already syndicators and want to maybe take a step up in doing what they're doing, come up with some new ideas to make it a little easier. And the information on those 2-day events can always be found at my website.
All right. Well, let's switch gears here to mindset. I've discovered just through doing interviews and talking to people that mindset is everything when it comes to this business. It requires a decision in your mind to succeed, right? So where would you say your mindset originates from? Where did it come from? Where did you pull your grit and determination from to really do what you do today? Because I'm sure it's hard work, right?
Sure. Well, I've always wanted to be on my own. I've never been a W-2 employee. I've either been totally on my own or at sometimes 1099 type of employee. So that's what I wanted to do. What can I do really to add value and stay relatively small? I think that's been really important to me, to stay small and to add value. And, in the real estate business, all sorts of people would like to invest in real estate. Whether I was a broker or I was a syndicator or now as an attorney, you can always find a way to mentor and help people to get into a great investment vehicle. So that's my mindset. Really, when I got out of college, the first thing was, even though I was an accountant, I didn't want to be a CPA. What can I sell? What can I sell that's big? And back in the 70s, if you weren't an engineer, you couldn't sell a computer, which was about the size of my office. You couldn't sell airplanes. So, back in Minnesota in 1972, selling a $35,000 house was a pretty big price tag on a product. So I spent the first year selling houses and then quickly realized that wasn't going to work. So I went into commercial big ticket items.
That's right.
And then now I'm 70. So what's my mindset today? My mindset today is continue to do the same things I'm doing, but I'm a little more concerned. And I share some personal stuff with you. We're an empty nester situation now. My girls are often gone, and my wife's been retired for 10, 12 years. And I'm concerned every day, I'm 70, that the number of days may be limited. And did I spend this day doing what I want to do the best at? Is when I go to bed, did I waste this day or whatever? And I have a friend who told me once, it's an easy deal. You just figure out, did you spend a good hour? Okay. Did you spend a good morning? Did you spend a good hour in the afternoon? Did you spend a good afternoon? And if you did all that, eventually you spend a whole good day.
That's right.
If the days are numbered and are precious, and I need to spend them all, and it's since kids aren't home anymore and my wife is retired, work is a part of it, but there's another part that's coming up and probably understand what I'm talking about. So that's where my mindset is today. Was it today?
And you know what, though? It's funny because all of our days are numbered, and we have to make the most of it. We have to try to live each day to the fullest and not waste time. I'm truly a big believer in that. Absolutely. Have you seen any type of limiting beliefs that really stopped people from achieving more in this business? Like maybe you've seen someone, maybe a client that might have worked with that they're capable of doing more. They just have a limiting belief that they think they can't.
Well, that's the limiting belief. I can't do that. I can't do that. Well, how do you overcome that? Get some education, get a mentor. Our industry is full of wonderful people that you can talk to. You can take their classes, you can learn, and you can network with other people who started without any idea that they could do this. And right now I'm talking about being a syndicator. No idea you could do this. And they limit themselves because they haven't taken advantage of the education and the other people that are out there that are more than happy to mentor, more than happy to help. I have a limitation that I've placed on myself through my whole career, and it's always been not to get too big. At some point in time, and I can point to 3 different times in my career that I faced an opportunity, not a challenge, but an opportunity to grow. And I've decided it was a challenge and pulled back to where I'm comfortable. Okay.
Yes.
So that's been a limiting deal on that's why my law firm has 2 partners, not 18. Right?
That's right. But I think that those limiting beliefs come from fear, right? And when you get a mentor that can show you the way, I had a mentor when I first started out. The whole single family thing, that's where I started. I had a mentor, and today I actually mentor people myself. So it's really good to give that back.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get into the bullet round. We're going to ask you some rapid fire questions. You ready?
Yes.
All right, good. So if you can give your 20-year-old self a word of advice, what would you tell him?
Always get educated. Never stop learning.
Excellent. 3 of your most influential books and why?
That's a question that no one is going to want to hear the answer to, but I will tell you that I was adopted. I was an adopted only child. My daughters were adopted. My wife was adopted. We've had some struggles with adoption in our life. And so I have read a number of books in the last 10, 12 years about the scars that adoption can leave on someone. And I'll just leave it at that. But I will tell you one book that really moved me, and it was The Shack.
The Shack.
Our talking about why I read that book, when I read that book, what moved me to read that book, and how it fit into my life at that time. But I've probably read that book 11 times. And I know the ending. Isn't that funny? I know I know what the message is. And I've read books of theologians and philosophers who've written about what does that book mean. So I kind of got into it, but that's a little too personal. So there we go.
I'm going to include a link in the description so people can check it out.
Okay, great.
So what would you say is your philosophy for life and success? Like, what motivates you?
Well, right now we're just talking about did I spend this day the way I wanted to spend this day?
Okay.
I will tell you that 5 or 6 years ago, I made a New Year's resolution that I would not work on Sunday. It's very easy for us entrepreneurs to work all the time, right?
Sure.
So my resolution was I would not work on Sunday. And my second resolution was that my Sunday would start at noon on Saturday. Never kept those resolutions. Never. To this day, I work on Saturday and I work on Sunday. A big challenge is planning. How do I take a weekend off? What do I do with Kay or the kids or whatever that really creates a weekend off? And generally, it's revolved around traveling. Let's get away from the office. Let's go somewhere where I'm not going to be tempted to drive down to the office and go to work, because my office is, a quarter mile from my house. It's so easy.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, if you want to reach out to Gene, you can reach him through the company website, crowdfundinglawyers.net. I hope you got a lot of good insight on how to set up a syndication of your own. Of course, just call Gene. You can see how this is crucial to your success. Thank you for your time, Gene. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cash Flow podcast. For more free podcasts, articles, videos, and resources, go to www.bulletproofcashflow.com.